Everything is energy. Energy can neither be created nor destroyed. It can only be transformed into a different form of energy. We can only transform and redirect what already is.
All type of knowledge ultimately means self-knowledge. So therefore, they are coming in and ask me to teach them not so much of how to defend themselves or how to do somebody in. Rather, they want to learn to express themselves through some movement, be it anger, be it determination, or whatsoever. Running water never grows stale, so you gotta just keep on flowing. To me, ultimately, martial art means honestly expressing yourself. Now, it is very difficult to do. I mean, it is easy for me to put on a show and be cocky, and be flooded with a cocky feeling and then feel like pretty cool and all that. Or I can make all kinds of phony things, you see what I mean, blinded by it, or I can show you some really fancy movement. But to express oneself honestly, not lying to oneself, and to express myself honestly, that, my friend, is very hard to do. And you have to train. You have to keep your reflexes so that when you want it, it's there. When you want to move, you're moving. And when you move, you are determined to move. Not taking 1 inch, not anything less than that. If I want to punch, I'm gonna do it, man, and I'm gonna do it, you see. So that is the type of thing you have to train yourself into it, to become one. I said, empty your mind. Be formless, shapeless, like water. Now you put water into a cup, it becomes the cup. You put water into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. You put it in a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Now water can flow, or it can crash. Be water, my friend. Well, Kung Fu, the best example would be a glass of water. Why? Because water is the softest substance in the world, but yet it can penetrate the hardest rock or anything, granite, you name it. Water also is insubstantial. By that I mean you cannot grasp hold of it. You cannot punch it and hurt it. To be soft like water and flexible and adapt itself to the opponent. You know what I want to think of myself? As a human being. Because under the sky, under the heaven, man, there is but one family. It just so happened, man, that people are different.
The superhuman strength. Bob Baker crossed his arms and told the crowd he'd seen every fake martial arts trick there was. At the Long Beach International Karate Championships, Baker had volunteered to expose what he assumed was another con artist pretending physics didn't apply. Bruce placed his fist against Baker's chest, with maybe an inch of space between his knuckles and the man's body. What happened next defied everything Baker thought he knew about force and motion. He flew backward like he'd been hit by a car, crashing into a chair that probably saved him from going through the wall. Punches need distance to build power. Every boxer knows this. Every fighter knows this. Years later, Stanford biomechanics researcher Jessica Rose spent months analyzing the footage. Her calculations kept coming out impossible. Bruce had generated over 1,500 newtons of force from that single inch of movement. Enough power to crack ribs like breadsticks. The secret wasn't in his arm. The power started in his back foot, pressed against the floor like he was trying to push the earth itself. That force traveled up through his calf, twisted through his thigh, accelerated through his hip rotation, whipped through his core, channeled through his shoulder, and finally exploded out of his fist. Every muscle fired in perfect sequence, each one adding its power to the wave traveling up his body. The final snap of his wrist at impact multiplied everything, like cracking a whip. Hundreds of martial artists have tried to replicate the one-inch punch. They study the footage frame by frame. They practice the stance, the hip rotation, the weight transfer. Some manage to push people back a few feet. Nobody has matched the original. Bruce was building a science of combat, testing every technique against resistance, keeping only what survived reality. Bruce's students were winning street fights after 6 months. They sparred constantly against different styles. No belts, no forms, just evolution toward becoming more dangerous. He called it Jeet Kune Do. 3 principles replaced 10,000 techniques. Simplicity, 1 movement instead of 2. Directness, the shortest distance to your target. Freedom, becoming water that could crash like a wave or flow around obstacles. Traditional masters sent champions to challenge him. Each one left confused and bruised. Bruce Lee couldn't see his own students' faces from across the training room. -5 diopters in both eyes meant anything past arm's length dissolved into colored blurs. When the U.S. Army tested his vision in 1963, they classified him 4F, medically unfit for service. The same eyesight that disqualified him from carrying a rifle somehow didn't stop him from becoming the most feared fighter alive. Most people would have quit martial arts with vision that bad. Bruce rebuilt his entire fighting system around it. He couldn't see punches coming the way normal fighters did, so he learned to read bodies instead of movements. A shoulder drops a quarter inch before a punch launches. Hips rotate milliseconds before a kick fires. Weight shifts from the back foot to the front before any forward attack. Bruce trained himself to see these tells through the blur, identifying threats by shape and motion rather than detail. The limitation forced him to develop something beyond normal perception. While other fighters watched their opponent's eyes for telegraphs, Bruce felt changes in air pressure when limbs moved through space. He could sense the displacement of air from a punch before it reached him. Training partners described sparring with him as fighting someone who had radar. He'd dodge strikes thrown from his blind spots, counterattacks he couldn't possibly have seen coming. Chi Sao, the Wing Chun sensitivity drill where fighters maintain constant arm contact, became his laboratory for developing supernatural awareness. Bruce reached levels where he could fight entire matches through touch alone. Dan Inosanto would blindfold him completely, and Bruce would still control the entire exchange, redirecting force before his opponent even committed to movements. He'd tell students exactly what attack they were about to throw, based solely on tiny muscle tensions he felt through their connected arms. The blindfolded training went beyond drills. Bruce would navigate his home in complete darkness, practicing forms in rooms where he couldn't see walls or furniture. He'd have students randomly attack him while his eyes were covered, learning to fight using only sound and air movement. This wasn't mystical nonsense about sensing energy. It was a practical adaptation to a physical limitation that should have ended his fighting career before it started.
Martial art has a very, very deep meaning, but it's a combative form of fighting.
While bodybuilders of his era were piling on plates and chasing maximum weight, Lee was doing something completely different.
When you're talking about fighting as it is, with no rules,
real fighting,
well then baby, you better train every part of your body.
Bruce became obsessed with finding more sophisticated training methods. He started reading everything he could about strength, conditioning, speed, and power. He consulted with bodybuilders, studied exercise physiology, and experimented relentlessly on his own body. This obsessive quest led him to James Lee and Alan Joe, his students in Oakland who were deeply into weight training. They introduced him to barbell work, but Lee immediately recognized that simply copying bodybuilding routines wouldn't serve his purposes. He needed something different. He needed training that would make him faster, more explosive, and capable of sustaining maximum effort without fatigue. It was then that his entire philosophy began shifting. Speed over mass. Alan Joe, one of Lee's training partners, would later reveal the fundamental difference in their approaches. James and I were into heavy weight training, Joe explained. Bruce went with lighter weights, with higher repetitions. This distinction wasn't arbitrary. Lee had discovered a principle that most athletes of his era completely missed. Speed is more important to power than mass. Traditional bodybuilding focused on progressive overload, constantly adding weight to build bigger muscles. Powerlifters pursued maximum strength through increasingly heavy lifts. Lee rejected both approaches for combat applications. He understood that in a fight, you don't have time to slowly generate force like you do with a heavy squat. You need explosive power delivered instantaneously across multiple strikes in rapid succession. His research led him to the old-time strongmen, particularly Eugen Sandow, who performed incredible feats of strength without the massive, bulky physique of modern bodybuilders. Sandow looked like Michelangelo's David sculpture, but could lift tremendous weights and demonstrated extraordinary physical capabilities. The secret? Sandow advocated high-repetition training with lighter weights, combined with intense mental focus on the muscles being worked. Lee also studied the work of figures like Alexander Zas, another strongman who emphasized tension and control over raw weight. These pioneers understood something that mainstream fitness culture had forgotten. True strength involves the nervous system, not just muscle size. The ability to recruit maximum muscle fibers instantly, to generate force rapidly, and to maintain that output over time required different training than simply adding plates to a barbell. Bruce didn't chase weight. He chased usable power. Every rep had a purpose beyond the mirror, said Dr. Adrian Kwan, neuromuscular performance researcher at the Hong Kong Institute of Human Movement. Lee began experimenting with speed training, performing regular exercises, but executing every repetition as explosively as possible. This approach recruited more fast-twitch muscle fibers, the ones responsible for rapid, powerful movements. He discovered that training with the intention of moving weight quickly, even if the weight itself was moderate, produced better results for martial arts than grinding through heavy lifts.
But it's a combative form of fighting. I mean, it's not, some of them became sport, but some of them are still not. I mean, they use, for instance, kicking to the groin, jabbing fingers at the eyes, and things like that.
His squat philosophy perfectly illustrated this principle. Why load 300 pounds on your back when the movement pattern doesn't translate directly to kicking or jumping? Heavy squats make you good at moving slowly under enormous loads. Light squats performed explosively developed the explosive power needed for lightning-fast kicks and cat-like agility. The 95-pound squats on that 1965 gym card weren't a sign of weakness. They were a deliberate choice to train qualities that actually mattered in combat. Dr. Raymond Steele, historian of martial arts training and sports science consultant, said, "Explosive squats for explosive kicks." It sounds obvious, but Lee was practically alone in thinking that way in the 60s. Lee also recognized that heavy lifting caused significant muscle damage and required long recovery periods. This interfered with his primary training, which was martial arts skill development. If he was too sore or fatigued from squatting 400 pounds to practice his techniques properly, the strength training became counterproductive. How could Lee hold a 120-pound barbell at arm's length with ease? The answer lies in a short, brutal routine that strengthened muscles you didn't even know you had. The isometric secret. One of the most overlooked aspects of Bruce Lee's training was his use of isometric exercises, and this component was absolutely critical to his extraordinary strength and speed. Isometrics involves generating maximum force against an immovable object. Lee became fascinated with this training method after studying the work of Bob Hoffman, a pioneer in Olympic weightlifting and strength training who advocated for isometric training in the 1960s. Bill Starr, himself an Olympic weightlifter and coach, called isometrics the ultimate strength exercise. The principle is simple, but brutally effective. Instead of moving weight through a range of motion, you push or pull against something that won't budge, using 100% of your available force for 6 to 12 seconds. Lee would chain barbells to the floor and attempt to curl them with maximum effort. He would try to press immovable bars overhead. He would pull against fixed resistance with everything he had.
A newly uncovered 1965 workout card has shocked fans worldwide. Bruce Lee, the fastest man in martial arts, wasn't lifting heavy at all. Just light, explosive reps that built the legendary speed and power we still talk about today.
Sensei Hiro Tanaka, martial arts conditioning expert at the Tokyo Combat Performance Lab, said, "Bruce understood that true power doesn't just move weight, it locks it in place and unleashes it all at once." This training method offered unique advantages for martial artists. First, it allowed recruitment of every available muscle fiber simultaneously. In regular lifting, You can't use 100% effort because you'd lose control of the weight. With isometrics, you can push to the absolute maximum without risk. Second, isometric training strengthened the specific angles and positions most critical for fighting. Lee could target the exact position where his punch generated maximum power and train that position intensely. The neurological benefits were equally important. Isometric training improved mind-muscle connection, the ability to consciously activate muscles at will. This translated directly to faster, more precise movements in combat. It also enhanced what's called rate of force development, the speed at which you can generate maximum force. In a fight lasting seconds, this quality is far more valuable than the ability to grind through a slow, heavy lift. Lee developed a simple 8-exercise isometric routine that he performed 2 to 3 times weekly. The exercises included press lockouts, pull exercises, shoulder presses, rises on toes, and various pulling movements. Each exercise was held for just 6 to 12 seconds at maximum effort. The entire routine took minimal time, but produced remarkable strength gains without the bulk or recovery demands of heavy lifting. American karate champion Joe Louis, who trained with Lee, later recounted that Lee could hold a 120-pound barbell straight out in front of his body at arm's length. This incredible feat of strength came not from curling massive weights, but from isometric training that developed deep stabilizer muscles and extraordinary tension control. Lee's approach focused on these deeper muscles rather than the superficial mirror muscles that bodybuilders prioritized. While the world chased bigger muscles, Lee chased purpose, building a body designed for speed, power, and precision, not for the mirror. How did he turn performance into the ultimate measure of strength? Functional over aesthetic. A famous story perfectly captures Lee's philosophy. Dan Inosanto, Lee's close friend and training partner, once commented on a massive bodybuilder emerging from a California gym. "Man, look at the arms on that guy," Inosanto exclaimed. Lee's response was immediate and dismissive. He questioned what those enormous arms could actually do. Could they throw fast punches? Could they maintain speed and power for an entire fight? Could they move with the flexibility and coordination required for martial arts? Lee wasn't interested in muscles that existed purely for appearance. Every element of his physique had to serve a functional purpose. His training philosophy emerged directly from this principle: build only the strength, speed, and endurance required for combat effectiveness. Anything else was wasted effort and counterproductive bulk that would slow him down. This approach made Lee a pioneer in what we now call functional fitness, decades before the term became popular. Modern MMA fighters, tactical athletes, and performance specialists have embraced Lee's principles, recognizing that sport-specific training produces better results than generic bodybuilding programs. Lee understood this in 1965, when most athletes still believed that getting bigger and stronger in the gym automatically translated to better performance in their sport. His measurements revealed his priorities. At his peak during the filming of Enter the Dragon, Lee stood 5 feet 7.5 inches tall and weighed approximately 140 to 145 pounds. His body fat percentage hovered between 4 and 6%, extraordinarily lean even by modern athletic standards. His chest measured 39 inches normally, expanding to over 44 inches. His waist was just 29 inches, creating a dramatic V taper. His arms measured 14 to 16 inches, impressive but nowhere near professional bodybuilder size. These proportions represented perfect balance for martial arts. Enough muscle to generate explosive power, but not so much mass that it compromised speed or flexibility. Lee could perform a full front split, execute flying kicks at head height, and move with balletic grace. No bodybuilder of his era, regardless of their strength, could match his physical capabilities and combat-relevant skills. Lee famously stated, "I don't want to get big, I want to get better." This mentality separated him from weightlifters and bodybuilders who pursued size and strength as ends in themselves. Lee pursued performance. The muscular development was merely a side effect of training for speed, power, agility, flexibility, and endurance. He viewed his body as a tool, not an aesthetic project, and shaped it accordingly with ruthless efficiency. Lee's training didn't stay the same for long. From arm-heavy routines to minimalist full-body workouts, he constantly evolved, blending strength, cardio, and core work into a system that built the martial artist seen on screen. What drove him to refine every move so ruthlessly? The evolution of his training. Lee's training methods evolved dramatically between 1965 and the early 1970s. That viral workout from Hak Kyung Gymnasium represented an early phase, when he was still experimenting with traditional bodybuilding approaches. His program would transform multiple times as he discovered more effective methods. According to John Little, who compiled Lee's training notes in The Art of Expressing the Human Body, Lee's resistance training went through distinct phases. The 1965 arm-heavy routine eventually gave way to a more balanced full-body program. By the late 1960s, Lee was performing clean and press, barbell curls, behind-the-neck presses, upright rows, barbell rows, bench press, barbell pullovers, and squats. He typically did 2 sets of 8 to 12 reps for most exercises, with squats getting higher rep ranges of 12 to 20. This program hit each muscle group 3 times weekly, but with moderate intensity that didn't interfere with martial arts training. By the early 1970s, Lee had simplified even further. His weight training became remarkably minimalist. Clean and press, squats, barbell pullover, bench press, good mornings, and barbell curls. Just 6 exercises, 2 sets each, performed 3 times weekly. This streamlined approach took less time and energy while maintaining the strength qualities he needed. He used this unbelievable workout to achieve the physique seen in films like The Big Boss and Way of the Dragon. Lee also discovered peripheral hard action training, a circuit-style approach he found in Iron Man magazine. This method kept blood circulating throughout the body, rather than pooling in one muscle group, creating both strength and cardiovascular benefits simultaneously. He would perform exercises in sequence, alternating between upper and lower body movements, essentially creating what we'd now call metabolic conditioning or circuit training. His cardio evolved significantly after the Wong Jack Man fight. He ran 3 to 4 days weekly, covering 4 miles per session using fartlek training, alternating between different paces like modern interval training. He jumped rope extensively, sometimes on alternate days, meaning he performed cardiovascular training 6 days weekly during certain periods. He also incorporated stationary cycling, which he preferred over running because it was easier on the joints while still building leg endurance. Core training happened daily without exception. Lee believed in developing what he called a concrete midsection, capable of absorbing strikes while generating power for his techniques. His ab work included sit-ups, leg raises, and advanced movements like the legendary dragon flag, an extremely difficult anti-extension exercise that few athletes can perform properly. But why did Lee ignore the heavy weights that bodybuilders worshipped? Why heavy lifting fails fighters? Modern strength coaches have validated Lee's instincts about heavy lifting. Loading massive weight onto your back for squats doesn't translate perfectly to any athletic movement. The neural fatigue from near maximum lifts is enormous, requiring days of recovery that prevent skill training. For an athlete who needs to practice techniques daily, this recovery demand becomes prohibitive. Lee understood this intuitively decades before sports science confirmed it. Consider the mechanics of a maximum effort squat. You descend slowly, reach the bottom position, then grind upward for several seconds against enormous resistance. Now compare this to a fighting movement like a kick or a punch. These movements happen in milliseconds, requiring instant force generation with no time to gradually build tension. Training your body to move slowly under heavy loads can actually impair your ability to move explosively without resistance. Lee's 95-pound squat made perfect sense when viewed through this lens. By using moderate weight and focusing on moving it as explosively as possible, he trained his nervous system for rapid force production. This is why he could kick with such devastating speed and power despite not being a heavy squatter. The quality he was developing, rate of force production, mattered far more than maximum strength for his purposes. Heavy lifting also builds muscle mass beyond what's functional for combat sports. Bodybuilders and powerlifters need that mass to move maximal weights. Fighters need a different ratio of strength to body weight. Lee maintained extraordinary relative strength, meaning his strength per pound of body weight was phenomenal. Adding 30 pounds of muscle might increase absolute strength, but if it decreases speed, flexibility, and endurance, it's counterproductive for fighting. The joint stress from heavy lifting posed another concern. Maximum squats and deadlifts place enormous compression forces on the spine. Heavy bench pressing stresses shoulder joints. Over time, this accumulated stress can lead to injuries that compromise athletic performance. Lee preferred training methods that built strength without destroying his body's ability to perform martial arts movements at high volume. Lee's approach to grip and forearm training illustrated his priorities perfectly. He performed extensive wrist curls, working to failure with moderate weights. He did finger push-ups. He used grip strengthening exercises constantly. Why? Because grip strength directly translated to grabbing opponents, controlling weapons, and delivering powerful strikes. Every minute spent training grip had direct combat application. Unlike the time required to rest and recover from a 500-pound deadlift, his training time was precious. Every hour needed maximum return on investment. Heavy lifting required too much time, too much recovery, and built qualities that didn't transfer efficiently to fighting. Lighter, faster, more explosive training delivered better results for less cost. Lee's training wasn't just lifting weights or running laps. It was a full-spectrum system that fused cardio, flexibility, martial arts, strength, and nutrition into a single, unstoppable machine. How did he manage to make every movement, meal, and minute count? The complete training system. Lee's training system integrated multiple components into a cohesive whole. Weight training was just one element of a program designed to develop every quality needed for combat. A typical day in the late 1960s and early 1970s began with morning cardio, running or cycling, followed by flexibility work. Lee understood that greater range of motion meant more speed and force. Afternoon sessions focused on martial arts, drilling techniques, sparring, heavy bag work, and forms. These movements provided conditioning that no gym exercise could replicate. Evenings often included weight training, plus his signature abdominal and forearm work. Lee was an extreme multitasker, training throughout the day, wrist curls or ab work while watching TV, barbells and dumbbells in every room, and his Marcy circuit trainer near the kitchen. Nutrition was equally important. Lee ate 5 small meals daily to maintain energy, avoided refined flour, and drank protein shakes blending eggs, milk, bananas, peanut oil, brewer's yeast, wheat germ, and lecithin. Supplements like ginseng and royal jelly supported circulation and energy, while protein intake aided recovery. He experimented constantly, keeping only what worked. This comprehensive approach trained not just muscles, but the cardiovascular system, nervous system, flexibility, coordination, balance, and focus, building a complete athlete rather than just a strong person. Decades later, Bruce Lee's methods still influence elite athletes, emphasizing smarter, faster, and more functional performance. What lessons from his revolutionary approach are still applied today? The legacy and modern application. Nearly 50 years after his death, Bruce Lee's training philosophy still shapes how elite athletes prepare. Bodybuilders like Arnold Schwarzenegger, Lou Ferrigno, Dorian Yates, and Lee Haney praised his physique and approach, while Flex Wheeler called him a pioneer in blending bodybuilding with martial arts. Modern MMA fighters have largely adopted Lee's methods, valuing functional strength over maximum lifts. What makes his approach timeless is its focus on results, not dogma. Lee experimented constantly, keeping only what worked. His famous advice, absorb what is useful, reject what is useless, and add what is specifically your own, applied equally to training and martial arts. The viral 1965 workout card is just one snapshot of his evolving methodology. Critics who dismiss it overlook the rest of his training: isometrics, speed work, cardio, flexibility, and martial arts practice. Athletes can learn from Lee's example. Train for performance in your sport. Prioritize transferable qualities. Respect recovery. Use lighter weights explosively. And develop comprehensively rather than specialize. You don't need a 400-pound squat or 20-inch arms to deliver powerful strikes. You need clear goals, intelligent methods, and consistency. At 5 feet, 7.5 inches, and 140 pounds, Lee moved faster than cameras could capture, struck with power that shocked larger opponents, and built a physique that remains iconic. He achieved this not through heavy lifting, but through precise programming targeting exactly what he needed. Does training for speed and explosive power produce more functional strength for martial arts than lifting heavy weights for size? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.